All right, we're live. Scott Stevens on Another Perspective, the first show of this nearly second week since election night, back on the 3rd. And that ultimately is not resolved yet. Looks like I'm peeking on the mic here. Dial that back just a touch. A lot of things, a lot of loose ends still going on this Monday evening, from the election that isn't resolved to the transition that looked like it was called and now may be called into question because of some election irregularities. But still other agendas around the world continue to advance. And so we're going to call this episode Lockdown's Return, as we approach Thanksgiving, but is less than 10 days out, not this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And there was a story, I believe it was AAA, the American Automobile Association, talking about or discussing the likelihood that persons would travel to visit friends and family on Thanksgiving. And that number was something like 69% would not travel, where previously they would have or would have plans to, weather dependent. And that number was even higher for Thanksgiving at 71%. So if you're used to traveling and the congestion and the high prices in the roads and all of that negotiation, if you still do travel, it might be fairly easy. The issue that then would pop up would likely be associated with lockdowns and the restrictions that may be in place as we go into different jurisdictions, because we don't have and have never had a national policy for any kind of disaster like this or event like this. It is usually resigned or let to negotiate state by state by state. That's just state rules. That's just part of the Constitution, how that is left. So it looks like a long planned Agenda 2030 is now well underway as the Great Reset looms, if it isn't here already. But there are some strange things I came across this week. How can one use this Build Back Better agenda to further one's own well-being? And that's really where we are. How can we take advantage of this? What are the possibilities that lie out there in the chaos, in the plans of the elite, if you will, to change the world, to rejigger things? And I kind of find it curious, because it's been their world all along. They have controlled media and medicine and this, and this. So if this was such a big deal, why not just do it through the proper channels that are already there? Why crash the economy? Why put everybody through the stress? Why go that route? That there has to be the shock across the population, across the planet, to affect an agenda. So here we are, coming up on lockdown number 2. Portugal, Spain, Italy, Hungary, Paris and France, the metro areas seem to be going first, and those populations get hours or a few days notice before this happens so they can prepare. And the choice of most people is simply to flee the populated areas. Let's get rural. Let's get where we have some space to breathe. And I couldn't argue or disagree more. All right, we have a couple of states, Vicki and Robin over there. Good to see you. Illinois, Pennsylvania, California, Oregon, Georgia, Wisconsin, Oregon. Did I put Oregon in there twice? It must have been really important. Arizona, New Mexico are the ones that have so far, at least their governors, and some of them some of them may have stepped beyond their authority to affect or to dictate these lockdowns. There are some people now beginning to stand up and say, no, this is beyond your jurisdiction. But nonetheless, here we are. We'll go to the UK and look at their second waves. A lot of cases. That's not in question. A lot of cases. But what happens is that the deaths attributed to COVID are not as high, especially in a ratio and a percentage, as to the previous wave that we saw last spring. I see, and my opinion is that there's 2 reasons for this. One, we kind of know what we're dealing with. The ERs, the general practitioners, they have a way, a methodology, a list. Let's do this, this, and this, and this for the patient. And we can recognize that we have a novel issue, and we get right on it. So that has really helped to mitigate the deaths attributed to COVID in the UK. So as a percentage-wise, even if we're having 5% of the population come back with positive tests, and maybe a good portion of those are simply the flu, but then there are some legit cases in there and they're spreading. But we know how to treat them, especially if they arrive quickly. All right, stateside, and from the WHO, what it is interesting, if we look at the number of cases of influenza by their groups, the different kinds of subtypes of influenza, that there was a pretty good number of cases as we went out week by week by week by week. What is missing are those cases for the flu this year. It's gone. It's like the flu has been relocated into this other coronavirus called COVID. Some are fine. Some have a serious flu incident, but nonetheless, these other viruses have now been relabeled. In fact, there was a slide I wanted to present that I saw on CNN, and it was a house burning down. And it was, what was it? Resident dies by COVID in-house explosion. Think about that. Truly think about that. It's ridiculous how many cases of death, whether it's stroke, heart attack, the list, they've all been swept into the COVID pile because there is financial incentive to do so. So 6% of deaths, COVID was the only cause mentioned. The rest had on average 2 to 3 additional conditions of death or comorbidities. And that's just out of everything that we've had stateside, because we hear the press talking about 2,200 or 220,000 cases, and that number, which is just strictly COVID, is much, much less. But what that presents us, or presents the elite, those who believe that their bloodline entitles them to tell us how to live, is an opportunity to seize the moment, to change how we treat this planet in a big, big way. So, COVID has locked down the planet once again, and the key is science. And we've learned since this graphic, this cartoon was drawn in March, that maybe the key is silence in combination with science. So, prior to COVID, yes, we had a very active, a very polluting economy. Even though for 50, maybe 100 years, we've had technology to make those transitions, to put oil behind us, but we have chosen not to. So I find it difficult that the World Economic Forum kind of person can say that we need to go through this process to save the planet when we've had the technology there all along. That to me is disturbing. So today we find ourselves kind of in between the before and after, the after being tomorrow, where the economies have largely been reduced. I won't say they're shut down because the mail is still being delivered, Walmart is still open, the power is still on, we can still go to the grocery store, occasionally do a drive-through, so the economy isn't closed. It's just on 4 cylinders instead of 6. So the economy, well, the buildings are closed. Let's stay at home. And obviously, this testing is a big part of the science to justify these actions. Come tomorrow, what is their ideal? Come tomorrow, when you wake up and the reset is now behind us, what will it be? If we have limitless energy sources, why will we be dependent on solar and wind? We will be eating local. But will we really, or is that just propaganda? Because there's other aspects to these principles of this build back better mantra that we hear from Europe to Asia, Australia, and here stateside, and even into Canada, where Justin Trudeau had a speech that he delivered, or recorded more likely, when he was in quarantine back in September, that is now out. And he was essentially pledging Canada's assistance in getting this reset done. We'll get back to Canada at the very end in a very curious story out of the Great White North. So, new goals, socially just. Who decides what is just and ecologically safe? Green infrastructure and provisioning, protect environmental standards. We have the EPA. We have these institutions. We have these organizations in many, many countries. Have they not been working? And if they haven't been working now or the past decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, what makes you think that they're going to be any better when this happens? If we can't affect accountability for the laws that are already on the books, how is that going to change once we're building back better? I don't see. I see a little dissonance in here. Universal basic services. And for me, this is part of why the economy goes through lockdown time number 2 and probably time number 3 and 4, is to institute universal health care, which on the cover seemed like a great thing when we didn't have a pandemic and threats to our liberty running around every corner. But if you don't have a job, you have to have these kind of services. They must be present for humanity to continue. Guaranteed livelihoods. Think about that. What do you want to do? Do you want to work in a coal mine? Oh, no. Coal's outlawed. What do you do? Do you want to code? Do you want to pick wheat? What do you want to do if a livelihood for you is guaranteed? What kind of jobs will be there? Fair distribution. So, not merit-based, not energy-based. I want to do this. I want to get this. You're not setting your own goals. You will be given an allotment per your number, per your position. Better democracy. Democracy is just ones and zeros. We're counting and there's a vote. Better democracy. So this is, again, another something else that is subjective in my eyes. Well-being economics organizations. Okay, that's kind of generic. Cooperation, sure. And then a public control of money. I think that is false. Unless they want to give up the printing press, unless they want to afford us all a Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other cryptocurrency mining machine upon which, when we strike or when we participate in the securing of a blockchain, that there's a monetary reward. And then truly, you could deal with a fair distribution, some kind of livelihood that would afford one universal basic services. You're certainly cooperating with a blockchain project, and then you would have public control of money. Just a thought. And so the Build Back Better, is it the Biden plan or just a cookie cutter agenda that will be applied and is being applied generally? And I'm just asking for a friend, he's just around the curtain, who's behind the curtain? And then the process is, how do we get there? How do we get there? COVID seems to be the key, the science for the locking or unlocking of this planet. So Elon Musk tweeted earlier this week, something extremely bogus is going on. Was tested for COVID 4 times today. Dude can afford it. And he probably has health care. He's, the boss of a couple of companies, so he could afford it. 2 tests came back negative and 2 tests came back positive. Same machine, same test, same nurse, rapid antigen test from BD. 4 tests, and then the response, and Kyle Griffin, who works at MSNBC, such an irresponsible tweet. And then look at the comments, 7,500 quotes and so forth and so on. So it generated a discussion. Now, Elon, being a scientist, and one of the premises in science is if you're to make a conclusion or draw a conclusion about something, you must be repeatable. And that's simply what the man was doing. He's got a nurse. He's on site. He's got tests. It's a rapid reply test. You do it over and over and over. See if the test is repeatable. Otherwise, there's a flaw somewhere in the process of the cycles to generate or to isolate the virus. Or maybe there's contamination on the test itself. You don't know until you run the tests. I'm just glad Elon could afford the tests, and he still didn't have an answer. So, positive or negative, where are we? Where are we in this? And that may determine whether you're able to go home for Thanksgiving, whether you're able to get in your car, go on the road. Maybe you have to show your little ID to the vehicle because it's got a scanner upon which, once you have your valid RFID thing or near field communication thing and a bracelet or a chip inside, then your car says, oh, good, we're good to go. I've got a green light to go, and then off you can travel. So we seem to be going down this road where that is the ultimate outcome. All right, predictive programming regarding the end of times, because, it's 2020. And we've had a few of those events that have fit inside of that structure, regardless of the belief system you were raised within. So as an aside, a 6-year-old Michael Bay TNT original series called The Last Ship. Now you can go find it on TNT and look at it. Watch this program with a little more of a discerning eye. In the show, they cover the following crises as a part of their storyline. Number one, a man-made virus murdered 80% of the planet. We have been promised at least 3 viruses. This was the first one. The second seems close at hand. Number 2, nation states dissolve, which is a desired goal of the globalists. Number 3, a massive famine would wipe out many of the people who survived the virus, and the thing that saved them was a magical vaccine that was developed aboard the last ship. A ship isolated at sea, able to work in the quiet, in the peace of solitude from what was happening on land. Finally, number 3 or 4, the United States was attacked Pearl Harbor style, and the Red Dawn scenario was unleashed. I remember that movie well, Red Dawn. I was in college when that thing came out, and war movies and these kind of things have always fascinated me. And now I know why. Some believe the predictive programming must be engaged because of some cosmic rule requiring notification to the masses of the globalist Satan-serving entities. I am, and I don't know about this, but this show is a textbook of what has happened or what is on the verge of happening. So you can scan on through this. You can pause the show and then read this, because I believe the quality is probably good enough right now. But what is interesting is over here on the third screen, that the head of the UN, and in this movie, there were some other documents that I was able to dive into, and the famine was going to be an issue. And the year was 2022, of a drought in the heartland of the United States on that year. And coming at this, from looking at the weather day after day after day, I can see how where the western U.S. has been droughted for the last, what are we coming up on, about 13 months now? That if it is another dry winter, and so far it has been a dry beginning to the winter through the western states, how 2022 might be, we're out of water supplies. The reservoirs are dry. The farmers are struggling with money. They're struggling with labor to get crops out of the field into market. So there's just a lot of little things going on that could lead me to be rather concerned about 2022. All right, this is a Bill Gates statement from last night on CNN. And he talked about, and he is not bashful at this stage of the game. They are not bashful. They feel that they have planned this out, have gamed this out, have the tech to see across the times, to see the period in the future where they are successful, where their goals that they're working and planning on now have been met. He stated, we needed to develop a digital certificate that shows who has received all the vaccinations. Only those with all the required vaccinations may travel, visit churches, participate in sport, music events, get a job, etc. COVID Pass, secure, ethical, and of course, trusted. COVID Pass, arguably the world's most secure, decentralized digital health passport that verifies and authenticates health credentials. COVID Pass gives everybody the ability and peace of mind to return to work. So what that leads to is the eye on each and every one of us. Whether it's a programmable chip that, let's just say the end timers have been talking about for quite some time, that gets the mark of the beast inside. And this may be that tool that allows them to see us at every point in our lives. All right, this is a little cartoon of where it seems like we are, where we're focused on COVID. And the powers that be understand that this is the byproduct. Poverty is the end result. And it is far easier to control a population that doesn't have the resources to act. Not act out, but simply to act. They become frozen in place because they cannot afford they cannot afford to move, can't afford to put in 2 tanks of fuel to get to grandma's for Christmas. They can't afford. And it's just that simple. So poverty being the issue, while we're focused on the reason why the poverty tsunami has come. I just kind of like this. Me with my dog after you guys take the vaccine. There is some concern or some ideas in that. All right, let's change shifts. This is going to be quick. A program designed to change votes is not a glitch. When we have seen some of what has turned out to be thousands of investigators go through all of the election results, they've been able to tabulate percentages of votes shifted, moved, taken away, and attributed to different parties. And you can begin to see the number of votes simply within one electoral system from state by state by state. And it's really kind of amazing how extensive this operation was deployed across the election. And it's in litigation, and much of the research happening behind the scenes will come out. Obviously, it's going to happen soon. 353 counties, 1.8 million more registered voters than eligible citizens. In my eyes, if you can drive, if you can show up at the DMV every 5 years to get a license, then that should be a simple requirement to vote. It just makes sense. All right. Numerous stories previous to the 2016 election. It was just understood that Americans and political operatives of both parties knew that elections could be rigged. It was just understood because it was not a centralized process. Multiple different programs from state to state to state, county to county to county, that all had to be integrated, all had to be secured. If you don't have physical custody of the vote from the time the ballot is designed to the time it's counted, and then even once it's counted, from counted over to tabulation and so forth and so on, there are just many, 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 many weak spots inside that whole process. And it's truly kind of scary. Truly scary. And I believe that's why the Founding Fathers instituted so many safeguards to this process. Is in their wisdom, they could see and understand, having come from where they've come from, the tyranny of the Europeans, that they needed to design a better system. And so this person, Ron Code Monkey, I've been familiar with his work for probably 3 years now, and probably one of the best hackers on the planet. There's a possible election machine scenario that I just discovered because he had access to code that is absolutely mind-boggling nefarious. It is the biggest and easiest potential method for operators of Dominion software to throw a vote. You're going to hear a lot about Dominion software and Scuttle, S-C-Y-T-L. Scuttle, they just declared bankruptcy just this past weekend, and no doubt it was to protect what assets they could retain. Scuttle. Go look at the definition of that word, scuttle. What if election fraud was as easy as dragging votes from one folder to another? Who are the county representatives, from 2 to 6 people per county, that had official training for the ICC device in their county? Do you trust those 2 to 6 people with your election results? This thing is going to blow up. David Rodriguez. Wow, Facebook removed President-elect from Biden's page. This was today. And now it says politician. So what does Facebook know to go in and pre-edit? Because they did this with President Trump as well and labeled him a political candidate 5, 6, 7 days ago. And so there's this, something's going on behind the scenes. For those that are interested in what Q has been saying about this, what advantages might exist when you know the other side's playbook? How would you know another side's playbook? Well, if you have access to the NSA intelligence apparatus, and I did a show on time travel a while back. They have dropped numerous crumbs, if you will, that tech exists, and it is being used. Enjoy the show. So, where are we as we head down 2020 and approaching 2021? As the election still remains unresolved, although one side has guaranteed us a resolution. So, we've got to decide, and we've had this discussion about our media platforms, the social media platforms. do they have the right to censor? I mean, is that truly, do they have that right to take my voice away? Are there other platforms that I should be using and I should just give up on these? It's like the AT&T phone line. Do they have the right to hang up on me if I'm talking to my mother about something? Do they have the right to listen in, to do voice to text and then text to censor and then cut a line, or even take away my privilege of using the phone altogether? Where are we with that? And there was a concern that Bill Russo will end up in hierarchy of the elects. I don't want to say chief of staff, but inside that inner circle, basically saying that it is time that we need greater censorship. It's just, that's where they're at. So we've got two sides to this. The rise of the black flags, or in it together. Where we go one, we go all. These are the two sides of this agenda that has America by, well, let's just say has America's attention. They're, I don't want to say radicalizing, but in some way that's the only true word that we're dealing with. Yikes. Burbank Public Schools banned these books from their curriculum. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and the list goes on. Books that I was required to read as a sophomore in high school because they're racist. Well, that's the point. And they're not necessarily racist. They're framing a discussion. So you'll think about it. And if we can't approach these topics like adults, or even as young adults, then we're going to be emotionally unprepared to deal with them in real life. We can't have proper conversations, a proper relationship with people without being able to see only their color, their sex, their identity. We can't see them, or we won't see them as human beings. And Dr. Fauci, well, now the time to do as you're told. Has he outlived his usefulness? All right, the most terrifying moment of the entire left movement is when they started using their own flag instead of the U.S. flag. It's exactly what Hitler's Nazis did, replacing the flag of their state with their own party symbol. And ultimately, that replaced the flag of Germany. We ended up with the swastika rather than their national flag. All right, Max Kaiser, I like him. He says the funniest things, and he's been a big fan of Bitcoin, and I've been there for a couple of years. So Bitcoin, in aggregate, all of them together worth trillions. Bitcoin will become the world's reserve currency. Companies locked in a hash war. That's a much better hash war than a kinetic war. Most banks will be gone, replaced with central bank crypto, combined with the political power of BTC billionaires who will dominate policy. Much like those rich folk in the world today who are using their fiat money to dictate policy. Now, last week we had a show on policy versus principles. And if we can live by principles, or at least be clear about which ones we hold dear, rather than some policy, we could do a lot more for the betterment of each other. All right, Michael Moore calls for Joe Biden to embrace socialism, eliminate the Electoral College, and reject bipartisanship. I liked the man when it was Fahrenheit 9/11. I really, really did. It seemed like he was doing the work. And now it's kind of gone off the deep end, because if we're not engaged with the other side, we'll never entertain their points of view. We'll never entertain their input, their life experiences, their own wisdom, which has brought them to where they are. We can't lop off half, 2/3 of the population and then march forward, because that is dictatorial. All right, now for the strangest and honestly the scariest, maybe it's not scary, maybe it's just bloody creepy, item that I've come across this week. And it was a requisition request for hydraulic guillotines from Canada. Justin Trudeau. What is the PMO's office doing right now, for goodness sakes? Canadian government, up to Distributed News, publishes a bid request for programmable hydraulic guillotines needed in, get this, support of Canada's response to COVID-19. I'm really at a loss as to what to say. Now, I know they want the population down. They make no bones about that. I mean, they don't even hide it. They put it on granite stones and mount them in Georgia in 1980 and declaring a sustainable world population living in harmony with its environment. It's beautiful, but at 500 million. But how do we get there? How do they want to get us here? And what price will they pay? Is it even in relationship or parallels to what we as the citizens will pay if you're not on a list to go underground? So you could pause it and look through this programmable hydraulic guillotines listing on the government's webpage. It's imminently Googleable. Here's the requisition request that pays. I didn't see a cost kind of thing, but it was literally brought to home. A couple of months ago, what was the guy's name? Randy Hiller, an independent Ontario MPP for Landmark Frontenac and Kingston, stood up and questioned the government, asking how many people would be detained and how many concentration camps are scheduled for construction. He expressed concern about their current use to control the spread of COVID-19 and pointed out in documentation that these sites could be used for other requirements. So as we get closer and closer to whatever this is, the details come into view. And they get a little bit more concerning time after time as the details come in. All right, Eric Voorhees, cryptocurrency guy that I follow. As the world polarizes, make sure to always remain skeptical of your own ideas. Recognize that you are likely wrong about many things you believe. Certainly should be asymptomatic, asymptotic, and you should always concede the chance that you may be wrong on any topic, no matter how dear. And that's the beauty of exploring, of looking at and considering the viewpoints of many different kinds of people, is those things that we were most certain about 2 years ago, except for maybe Bitcoin. We have to reevaluate what would have been a good investment 2 years ago, maybe not today. Should I live there? Or opinions of people as you see their activities behind the curtain get revealed. And then you tend to look at them a little differently. All right, we've got a product coming out, Sink or Swim 2030. And undoubtedly there's going to be an avalanche of change immediately ahead of us. And whether anyone outside of one with a playbook for this change can anticipate what's happening, but there are basic understandings that most of us, well, I can't even say that. If you're watching me, then you're probably in that list that's considered them. But we're going to be dealing with a financial issue. We're going to go right back to that Build Back Better, where if they're going to bring about equality, then you've got to turn the soil, and then you plant uniformly. And this is what has to happen. As Joe Calente said, the whole system's going down. Pull your money out of your Fidelity account, your Schwab account, and your ETFs. And it's sooner than you may imagine. Many economists and financial experts believe that signs of the collapse are quite visible now, both in our economy as well as the changing face of the world's COVID economy. And we're seeing this as lockdown number 2 happens. And once they amp this up with a different virus or something out of the blue, then we'll see why and how we've prepared for this coming to fruition, coming into reason. So what we need to do ultimately is reduce our dependency on the job. And most of us can only do that with savings. Or you're able to work at home and continue to reduce the expenses that we send out every single day. And if we can take steps to clear debt, that frees us out. And there may be some options that part of their plan is debt forgiveness, but that comes at a cost. Remember, nothing is for free, even if it sounds really good on the cover. There's ultimately a price that has to be paid somewhat down the road. So in clearing the debt, reducing dependency on the job, we have to reduce expenses. We learn useful tasks, hunting, fishing, growing food, and self-defense techniques. This is key, but again, can only take us so far. Regular exercises. Ultimately, that's we've got to be fit to deal with the troubles ahead. Food supply, non-perishable foods, waters, salt, and seeds. Salt. So many live so far from where salt can be gathered, dried, bagged, and then delivered to an end user. Many, many millions and millions of people live more than 300 miles away from a salt source. Coins will be in great demand since paper money might be worthless. And it may also be that next virus is easily communicated, shared from person to person upon paper money. Something to consider. Gunner bow and arrows for hunting, gardening equipment. These things can become priceless, especially when you don't have them and you need them. Handyman tools for building and repair. Farmland with a source of fresh water. We're a great, large land, but we're also 330 million strong. And the climate is changing. Fresh water becoming even more scarce. So it's amazing to see how many people have fled the cities since January, and especially since March, and continue to do so. And then being able to raise cows, chicken, meat, and eggs. But importantly, and maybe one of the most important things of all, is bonding with your neighbors. Know those that live around you, because we can go a lot farther and get through many more difficult circumstances with a tribe of familials, of friends, of family. We need to be able to and have already bonded with those neighbors. A flotilla of ships going out to sea. All the supplies are not on one boat. Command may be on one boat, but each ship still has a captain. It still has a chain of command. And each ship has a set of supplies, but together they can go across the ocean, and singularly they can go quickly, but then they're at great risk of meeting some kind of incident upon which could lead into a failure of the mission, a failure to meet the goal. So bonding with neighbors is epically big. And out my backyard, just out the window, I can see right there was just sand and buffalo grass, as it's called here in the high valley of San Luis Valley, Colorado. We brought in some compost, tilled the soil, but most of all, it needed water. And with that water, out in the valley, I bought a 50-pound bag of red potatoes last spring as COVID first hit. I'm like, oh, I want some potatoes. And it's like $12 for 50 pounds, at farmer's prices, straight out of the field. We got through what I could, and by May, the storage place was getting warm. They were ready to eye out, and they had to go in the ground. So just little slivers of potatoes, already kind of mushy and rotten. I just planted them just to see. And they produced beautifully. And so that harvest has come in, began in July, and continues to come in even on this day when it was in the 20s. So as we go through this crazy, crazy world, as all the crazy news hits us like a hose of water, the only way to survive this is, in the world dominated by idiots, is using one's self-control. Sometimes you just turn off the social media and get through the day. Because there's not a political problem, a political solution to the problems that politics has created. And maybe it isn't necessarily politics that has created it. Maybe it's just greed. Maybe it's disrespect for human beings. Maybe it's just adults in positions of power taking advantage of ... you fill in the blank. So until we can look at this thing as a spiritual problem, as a place to where we reintroduce what is right and what is wrong into the problems we face as a planet, they probably will not be completely resolved. And that's what we'll talk about on Wednesday, is the why. Why are these things happening? Why would the divine, the universe, the controlling power, God, if you will, want to see this planet and you and me in the kind of unsettled state that we find ourselves in? Why? Do we have to look at an ant above, trying to cross a road and go, why? Why do they keep hitting my tribe? Why? Or could we actually stand back and elevate our point of view to something far, far greater and see the moving pieces as they interact, not seamlessly, but with friction, as they try to influence one against the other. So we'll look at that on Wednesday on This Another Perspective. And from that Wednesday, that'll probably be the last show for the year. As we head into December, got to do a little family visiting, and I can't necessarily commit just yet as to when we'll get back on. But we'll talk about the why all of this is happening. And I want you there. Good to see you guys coming in on there. Facebook users, I don't know the names, truly scary. Robin and Vic, appreciate all the work you've done with this. Blood will be shed. I'll be waving the Civil War guillotine. Yeah, that guillotine story is a little, it's strange. I'll just put it at that. It's strange. So this agenda has been precisely planned out and set dates, and they'll hold to it until they cannot. And that is partly why, that may be exclusively why, I want to talk about the why on Wednesday. All right, guys, thanks for stopping by. Enjoyed your company, and we will see you on Wednesday. In the meantime, turn off Facebook and reclaim your attitude, reclaim your attention. It's yours. It's always been yours. All right, hey, keep looking up.